Hey everyone, Psychoriasin here, and welcome to another episode of the Psychological Problems Podcast. And today I'm joined with Flavia.
Hello.
And Bob is suffering from mouth ulcers. We found out that they're mouth ulcers, not mouth herpes. So I think the doctor said it was herpes at first, and then another one said it was ulcers. So, he's resting his ulcerous mouth right now. So I was thinking, for those who have seen my videos, my older videos, I've already talked about my story pretty much, and Bob has. Did I call him Jeff? Yeah, oops, Bob.
No, you didn't, but you just did now.
Oh.
That's okay.
Oh,
He's
okay.
not here. He'll never know.
He will. He'll watch it and oh. Anyway, Bob. What? Why did I even bring him up?
Because he's talked about his story.
Oh yeah, he's talked about his story. And so I figured it would be, I don't know if it's good, but
definitely not good for me.
important for Flavia to talk about her story, because I think it's very important too. I think stories are really important in general when you want to know about a person, when you want to know about their art or their experience. It really puts things into context. Flavia can...
Yeah. To preface this is really, really difficult for me because, God damn it. I'm not really used to talking about my story. So, I'm pretty fine with analyzing my own behavior, and I'm definitely fine with analyzing other people's behavior because I don't really, even when I connect to it, I don't really jump right into it. But when it comes to what happened to me and how I grew up, basically, it's really hard to, on one hand, it's really hard to associate myself with it. It's really hard to think, yeah, this happened to me, and this had pretty bad consequences, and I can't really deny the consequences. I can't really speak with a lot of tone and melody and whatever anymore. But when I was a child, I used to sing, and I used to really like singing, and I used to go on stage and sing and blah 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 and let it all out and be much more free. But that changed somewhere along the way as events unfolded. And on the other hand, it's really hard to put it in story form, because I remember things that happened pretty much as if they were yesterday, and my effort is usually keeping them at bay and keeping them contained and keeping my distance from them and not letting them impact my day-to-day life. So now that I have to talk about it as if it's a thing, I have trouble taking it seriously and making sense of it. So
it was super hard when I did my story. I think for you it would be even harder. But...
yeah, so far only you and a couple of other people know my story. And yeah. So before I was born, my parents met, and my mom was in her first year in university. My parents are both physics teachers, and they went to the same physics university in Romania, in Bucharest. And my mom was younger than my dad, and she was much better at school than he was. And he was fine in school, as in he wasn't dumb. Both my parents are pretty intelligent, but he was very lazy, and he had no respect for university and teachers. And that's probably because initially he wanted to be a doctor, but he got a case of hepatitis and he couldn't make the admissions, and then he had to go to physics because that was when he finally recovered from the disease. So it was always probably it was a second best thing for him, so he didn't take it seriously. So my parents met, and I don't know how long it was, but it wasn't too long until my mom got pregnant. And they didn't really tell anyone that they were pregnant with me, because they didn't really want me. But because Romania was a communist country at the time, abortions were illegal, contraception was illegal, punishable with prison and all that stuff. So I had to be born. And it was... I don't remember that much. I have memories from a pretty young age, but I don't remember the very beginning other than from stories and vague images that I get. But I was born, and then they didn't quite know what to do with me, my parents. They had me in their dorm room for a while, and then my mom's parents stepped in and said, no, you have to take better care of this child. So they found a nanny for me, and they just passed me off to the nanny, and eventually she wanted to buy me off of them, and they were going to agree from what I hear, but then my grandparents stepped in and said, no, we'll take her. And
your grandparents on which side?
My mom's side. I don't think my parents on my dad's side ever found out, because I guess my parents have a very Romeo and Juliet story where their families are of very different social standing and very against one another's principles. My dad's side, they're very well connected and very proper and very status oriented, whereas my mom's parents were much more down to earth, and both my parents of grandparents were very hard working people, so at least they had that in common. But my mom's side was more like practical, get your hands dirty and do stuff outside and make stuff, and they were born in the countryside, and they made it to the city, and just whatever they could scrounge up and just build it from the ground up. So it was my mom's parents who took me in, and initially my dad's parents took me, but then they got tired of me pretty quickly. So that was one of my first memories, is being in a car screaming as because my parents' families lived in opposite ends of Romania, and I was literally shipped across the country back and forth based on who it was more convenient for to have me at the time. So
this is when you were 1 year old, 2 years old?
I think, yeah, maybe 1 or earlier. And my first memory is of my grandpa's car's ceiling and me screaming and not wanting to, just yelling, and a lot of hours of anguish and just clinging on to familiar objects. And I had a baby carriage that I remember, and just very, very specific things, very hyper aware of every crack in the car and every noise that was going on. So that was that. And
but they didn't believe that you had that memory, right?
No, they believed it because...
Didn't you say that you said you remembered it and then they wanted you to explain it?
Yeah, they asked me to... Like, after I explained it to them, like, they asked... No, you couldn't possibly remember from that early an age. And I said, well, yeah, you remember that baby carrier and it had the spoke that was bent and stuff. And remember when I crawled out of my bed and I bent the bars to the baby bed and stuff? It's like, that was... I couldn't have known because they were the only ones at home and nobody had told me. Oh, okay. I kind of... Yeah, but that was a recurring thing, because things would happen with me, and I would talk about them at home. Like, I I saw this thing out the window, or they would ask me, oh, did you break this thing? And I would say no, and people didn't believe me. This has been a recurring problem throughout my life, where I guess because I don't know how to plead. I don't know how to talk while being aware of how to get a result. People just didn't believe me very, very often. I was accused of lying when I wasn't, and that made me very angry and very, I don't know, I guess I was very eager to withdraw, because I felt like it's not, like, what's the point in telling the truth when you're not heard, you're not even listened to. Yeah, so I ended up with my mom's parents, and that was actually one of the best things that happened to me in terms of my evolution, because on one hand I was away from my parents, and at the time I didn't know exactly how good it was to be away from them, but my grandparents were a pretty well-built pair, my mom's parents. My grandpa was very, I don't know how you would describe, like, if he was born in our generation, he would have a bunch of startups and he would just be exploring everything. And he grew up in the countryside, but when he finally made it to the city, he was persecuted by the communists, and then he had to hide in the mountains and live in somebody's basement for years and stuff. And then when he
had to join the party or whatever.
Yeah, they were forced to join the party, the Communist Party, and they were forcing everyone with a number of animals or a number of like a size of a plot of land. They were forcing everyone to hand them over and go on working in the very farms that were created on their demolished houses and stuff. And it was very, very oppressive. And my grandpa and his siblings and his mom, they didn't want to join the party. They didn't want to betray everything that they had worked for. They didn't want to write reports on their neighbors and spy, and because that was common practice. You would have to, every month there would be a party gathering, and you would have to rat out at least 3 people you knew and write about what you see them doing in their house and have they mentioned anything suspicious. It's very very dystopic. But yeah, so when he made it to the big city, he started learning a bunch of things. He was crafting these little, like, charms that people would wear on holidays. He did cell animation, just learned it on his own. And then he went to painting classes. He was just very, very eager to learn. And I had that in common with him, which was very, very good for me growing up, to have somebody to bond with over good stuff. Like, he would tell me stories when I was they wanted to put me to sleep, right? So he would tell me stories, and he would come into my room, and I would ask, tell me about how electricity works, tell me about the telegraph. Oh, I already told you about how electricity works. Yeah, but you didn't explain this, you didn't explain why sometimes, so he would tell me these stories, and then eventually he would fall asleep, and then I would march into the kitchen victorious. I put him to sleep. And that was very, very good for me to be able to just freely learn, because learning is one of my most important things that I have. I like learning about even things I'm not particularly interested in. I can't help it. It's still, like, if I'm eating and I've got nothing else on my mind at that moment, I'll read food labels. I can't help it. It's like, oh yeah, then I'll look something up. Oh, I didn't know this. Oh, what are they putting in food nowadays? So my grandpa was making stuff all the time, and sometimes he would make toys for me. Sometimes he would carve blocks out of wood for me to build stuff with at home, because I really liked building stuff, and he noticed that. And since we also had that in common, it's like, hey, help and stuff. But that lasted for a few years, and most of the summers I had to go to my dad's parents, and my dad's parents were a pretty sound couple as well, but in a very different way. I've not met many people for whom love is an obligation or a duty. I saw this with them from very early on. So my dad's dad was a doctor, a very highly respected doctor, and he was the leader of that city's hospital for many years, and he had many friends in high places, and they would always get like good quality food, which of course was hard to come by under communism. And my grandma, my dad's mom, she's a chemist. She's pretty renowned as well, and tons of books that she's written, and everything in that domain about her is very, very respectable. But they were very, very cold. They were very, I don't know, just duty bound to the elimination of feeling. There was no room to say I'm uncomfortable or I'm anxious or I'm scared or I don't know, just even, oh, I love you. That was a thing you're supposed to say. And what happened is, I wasn't really super introverted. I was pretty balanced, I would say, as a child. But I would go out and I would try to play with other kids my age. I would go to the park, and I used to talk mostly to adults and not with children. But when I did talk to children, I would come back home and then I would get ranted at by my grandma because I am playing with kids under my condition, and don't I know it, and don't I see that I shouldn't be trusting them, I shouldn't be telling them stuff, I shouldn't be, because people only want what's worse for you and they're only looking to betray you. And I felt very inadequate all the time. And my dad has a younger sister, and she's very charming. They both, my dad and her, have this charisma thing going on where they really perfected their image, their social prowess, I guess. And she's very charming and very, very aware of how to use her femininity to get somewhere in life. And I don't begrudge her that. I used to really like her very early on. But what she did is she liked me initially. We would hang out together and stuff, and then she started telling my parents that I'm a savage, I don't know how to do things, I am too loud, I'm not girly enough, I'm not feminine enough, I'm not a young lady. And both her and my grandma were saying that. You're not a young lady. This is not what a proper young lady does. A young lady doesn't sit like this, doesn't dress like this, doesn't eat like this, doesn't hang out with these people. And pretty much every trip there was me struggling to make it through the days without getting too sad and feeling too inadequate. But what I did have at my dad's parents was a huge library. We had this room. Basically, the entire living room was just covered floor to ceiling with books. The walls were just packed, and I could only reach a few shelves. But as I grew up, I could learn more and gather more books, and I would have to steal the key because it was under lock. I would steal the key and then sneak out a book or two and read them, and make sure that whenever I heard the downstairs gate opening and closing, I would run back to the living room and put it back right where I found it and make it look like nothing happened. And just I spent my summers reading, and I spent the rest of my year reading in my other grandparents' place. They also had a bunch of books.
What kind of books were they?
Basically, it transitioned from, they would gather a lot of art books, and they would gather a lot of how to do this books, how to whatever. And then as I was growing up, my parents started bringing more of their books, which were physics books. So I guess books were really my thing, and art was my very first word was guga. And that's an odd word for a child to say right off the bat. Guga was a painting. It's actually Grigorescu. It's a Romanian painting. And my grandpa had painted this master copy, I guess, of an oil painting of an oil painting. And it's just this black-haired, bearded guy, barefoot, with a toque on his head in a forest. And that was my first word, because that was my first friend. So I would steal this painting, which for some reason I really connected with that painting, and I would just take it off the wall, and I would hide in the family dresser, in the wardrobe. It was in a long, dark hallway that was circulated, but nobody would look in the dresser. So I was always in the dresser, talking to the painting, and just goo gaga, and then eventually telling him stories. And yeah, that was a thing. I really liked reading, and I really liked art. I don't know if I was obsessively reading, but I couldn't help it. It's like, oh, I'll see a book, and I want to see what's in it. I want to see.
It's probably obsessive.
I don't know, everything, like, it seemed so interesting. Granted, because I was a kid, like, oh, everything is new, but it felt like there's so much to learn, there's so much to gather, there's so much to steal, because I guess it was never freely given. Like, oh, the books were there, but I was kind of looked down on by my parents for reading so much. Eventually, when they discovered that I was sneaking the books off from their shelves, they started bribing me with books. And because by the time I got to school, I wasn't really interested in the curriculum, because most of it, like, so the school year would start, and then they would hand us the handbooks for the year, and I would read them in the first days, and then I would be done with them. For the rest of the year, I was like, no, I've been through this, next more. And I would just take physics books and stuff, and then when I asked my parents about, oh, what's a sinus function and how does it work and stuff, because I didn't really get it, and I read this book, and they would just laugh at me. And reading was just a thing I did. I don't think anyone taught me how to read. I think I just taught myself with just books. So they would buy me children's books, and I would spell them and try associating the letters. And when I was growing up, we had this show in Romania. Right after communism fell, the television changed, because when Romania was a communist country, you would only get 1 or 2 hours of television a day, one channel, the state channel, which had bullshit news, which were very highly edited by the regime, and then you would have an animal show where they would show a lion killing a gazelle for half an hour or whatever, and a pelican.
Fake news, nature shows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and right after communism fell, we had...
Which was when?
1989. We had a second TV channel.
It appeared.
Yeah.
They reproduced from 1 to 2.
Yeah, they reproduced. Like, it was the same state television, but channel 2. It's like, whoa. And we had series and shows. And one of these shows was called Dallas. And it was this soap opera, which I didn't know that it was a soap opera at the time. I knew nothing about the genre, but it was this soap opera about, I think it was made in the 70s, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
It was long, wasn't it? Like many years?
Yeah, many years.
I know my parents watched it.
Yeah, so I was watching Dallas, and mostly everyone else was reading the subtitles in Romanian. But I guess because I wasn't really paying attention to the subtitles, I was just paying attention to the spoken language, which was English.
So you were what, 3?
I think I was 4. I think I turned 4 by that time. So I was religiously watching Dallas and learning English, and that's how I learned most of my English before actually starting to...
That's why you don't talk like this.
Yeah, that's why I don't talk like this. And even though throughout school, for about 8 years, I've only studied British English, and I write in the British English way, I still speak like this.
What was the thing your English teacher tried to say? Like, there's a bunch of funny things.
I forget which ones. I forget. I must have told you the story, but I forget it right now.
One was there was a band, Rage Against the Machine.
Oh no! That was much later. Yeah. This was much later. Okay, so I had a history teacher in 8th grade, and he was this freshly graduated guy, and he was a metalhead, and all the girls in my class were like going gaga over him and stuff. But I was just arguing with him all the time. And then we had this graduation banquet kind of thing, and then he was telling me like, you know, you're still a kid, you're listening to Metallica and stuff like that, but wait until you grow up and you listen to Rage Against the Machine. We had like, I don't know, in Romania, and the schools I went to were good schools, but some of my classmates were not quite right. So what it just ended up, along the English classes that we had, we would have students who would say like, oh, they wouldn't remember the word for overalls, and the word for overalls in Romania is salopeta, which comes from the French salopette, and they would say salopete. And they would just anglicize Romanian words all the time, and they would make their own version of English. But then again, so did I, because I don't really speak anything but my own version.
Yeah, but that was kind of nursery at the time, right?
That was in high school. My high school teacher. Okay, so my high school English teacher was probably the most disastrous English speaker I have come across in my entire school experience. She was worse than some of the students. And I would argue with her, because I had to sit through class, but I would argue with her over pronunciation and spelling and grammar and pretty much everything. And sometimes I would have to bring the dictionary to her to prove my point, and she really hated me, and eventually she didn't want me in class anymore. She said, you're excused from class, you can just not show up, I won't give you a bad mark, just don't come to class anymore. Which was great. But she was saying it's necessary instead of necessary, and just mutilating the language, which I could never abide by. But yeah, so I really liked learning languages, but most of all with English, it felt kind of more close to me than Romanian. I don't know exactly why, because nobody around me really spoke English and stuff, but I was very into learning English and then teaching English to the most weird crowds. So when I was turning 6, my parents had graduated from their respective courses in university, and my dad had done his army service thing, mandatory army service thing, and usually in Romania at the time they would assign you a teaching position just by default. Like, oh, if you want to work somewhere, you can go work somewhere, but if you don't have a job offer, you can be a teacher, and we are assigning you to this school. And because my parents were from different cities originally, they had a pretty tough time getting assigned to the same school. So when I was 6, my parents moved back in. And for a time, the house was me, my grandparents on my mom's side, and both of my parents. And that was the beginning of probably one of the worst chapters in my childhood. My dad had and still has a huge ego, and he's a huge and very fragile ego. He is very aggressive and very quick-tempered and just not stable at all. And my mom is pretty manipulative, and while she's not as physically aggressive as my dad, she enables him. So before my parents moved in, I would talk to my grandparents about my parents, and I would refer to them as the kids. Because they were only visiting on weekends, and I would see them pretty rarely, and sometimes, a few times I think, I tried to hug my mom, and because I was like, oh, excited that they'd come back, and I would run to hug her, and she would just reject me. And that was painful, but I guess it really made me express myself a little less. It made me more withdrawn. But when my parents moved in, it became pretty clear that we weren't gonna get along, because as I said before, my parents' families didn't really like each other, and my dad's parents never approved of my mom, and my mom's parents definitely never approved of my dad. There were a lot of arguments, a lot of differences in character, and a lot of just issues. Like, my dad was lazy, he was very condescending, very rude, very aggressive, very thinking he knew it all, no respect for my grandparents. And on the other hand, my dad's parents thought that, no, my mom's from a too poor family, her skin's too dark, just pretty racist. Like, I guess it's a hidden type of racism, which I could never stand. And so after it became clear that my grandparents and my parents could not coexist, by the time I was 6, my grandparents, they'd been trying to get a house in the countryside, and they had a couple of attempts, but the first attempt, the house fell. It was lucky that we were sleeping in the car at the time, but the house just collapsed shortly after buying it. That's pretty funny. We were parked outside and sleeping in the car because we hadn't managed to get the house settled, like fixed and everything. And then come the morning, okay, let's go back to work and do stuff. And then we found the ceiling collapsed, caved in completely. So they had to sell that lot, and they lost some money and stuff, but they had saved up, and then eventually they bought a house which they could fix. And they moved to the countryside and retired from their normal jobs. And I went to the countryside with them, and basically we were just using whatever materials were growing in the garden to make walls and fences and makeshift windows out of plastic and sticks, and it was very rudimentary. And we didn't have a toilet in the house. We had what's it called, an outhouse in the garden. And it had cracks between the planks, and you could see outside, and the wind was howling in it at night, and it was pretty adventurous. And we had snakes in the garden because the grass was tall and everything, so we had to just tame everything. But meanwhile, in the apartment in the city, life was not that great for me. So, as I said, my parents...
So basically, your grandparents moved to the countryside and gave their old house to your parents.
Yeah, my parents stayed in the house. And as I said before, they didn't really want me. And they were not really equipped to deal with a child. So, since my dad has such a big ego and he thinks he knows how to do some things that he really doesn't know how to do, I would play around, and I would... I don't know, sometimes I would get splinters in my fingers and stuff, and he would heat up a needle, and he would stick the needle under my nail, under my fingernail. And he said that's what helps, that's what disinfects it, that's what makes it. And he would stab my fingertips, and just hurt me, and it never mattered how much I screamed. Sorry about that. I thought I could do this with a straight face, but I guess I can. Yeah, so he would just burn me. And after a while I just turned numb. I still can't feel heat up to my elbows. I can't really feel stabbing pain, and I can't really feel heat as a result of all that. And there was other stuff going on. Part of it was my dad, and part of it was my mom, and part of it was them together. They started to bathe me because they had to, and they would bathe me with almost boiling water, saying that, no, that's what cleans you best, that's what... And again, it didn't matter how much I screamed, it didn't matter how much pain I was in, and they didn't take me seriously. And I just remember if I screamed too much, they would hit me, and if I didn't scream, they would burn me. And I suppose after a time I don't know, I gave up. I don't know, I numbed out, I guess, in many ways. And my mom had a different arsenal. Whenever I got my dad angry, either because I was asking too many questions, or asking about, what does a word mean, or how do you do this, or I don't know, just eating too slow, I would get beaten up, and then he would get mad, and then my mom would come to my room and tell me to go beg him for forgiveness on my knees, and I had to do it. So a lot of my childhood was spent between retreating into my room and stealing a book and reading and stuff like that, and avoiding my parents and dealing with my parents and getting beaten up and dreading the summers, dreading the hatred, dreading the cleaning the blood. Yeah. My dad beat me up a lot, and the last time was I think I was almost graduating from high school. I think I was in my last year of high school, and by that point we had 3 cats, and my history with cats and animals in general is a bit longer, but so we had 3 cats, and we were giving them vaccinations and meds and stuff at home, and of course, as usual, he thought he knew how to do it best, and he was being very rough with them, and he was just hurting them to, as he was saying, make them stand still, but they weren't standing still, they were just squirming and trying to get away and screaming, and he was asking me to help him, and I said, no, if you're gonna hurt them, I'm not helping you, I'm not, just let me do it, I can do it. By that point, I'd learned how to give them meds and shots by myself, and he said, no, do it, and then he hit me, and then I lost it, and I hit him back, and I broke his glasses, and then all hell broke loose. He'd broken my nose before, and broken my lip and stuff like that, but that time it was pretty much, I don't know, movie style. So eventually I managed to crawl back down the long hallway into my room and lock the door, and then my dad was very angry, and then my mom came to me and kept banging on my door until I opened it, and then she was wiping the bloodstains off the wall, and the first thing she said to me was, you made him so angry, how could you? God, the walls are all dirty, and he's so angry when he sees it, I gotta clean it up. He's just wiping the stains. That was one thing, and then throughout the years, she was very, very good at sabotaging my self-esteem. She would write stupid with permanent marker on my, because after the communism fell, we found permanent markers. The West had sent us cultural tools, and my mom wrote stupid in big letters with unerasable marker on my room door, and she would write stupid on every page of my school notebooks, and she would number them, and I would have to go to school and just every page of every notebook was marked, and she would just get, my parents, they don't really get along that well. They've been together for many years, but they don't communicate well. There's a lot of drama and manipulation and aggression and stuff. My mom never got hit, but I was the one who got all the beating. And they often used me as a conduit for their arguments. Like, they would be on each and one end of the house, and go tell your mom this, and go tell your dad this, and no, go tell him this. No! She did this, and how can you even say that? And both of them were just dishing their anger out at me, and then when they met each other, they were friends again. They were fine, and they'd already solved it, and I just caught all the tension and all the garbage, I suppose. But shortly after my parents moved in, I thankfully got into school because I was 6 already. That was a relief to be out of the house. Just going to school and learning, even like as much as I could, and it wasn't terrible. I didn't like the cruelty that some kids had, and I think in 2nd grade it was that we had this like I guess, arts class. Sometimes we would paint, and sometimes we would make stuff out of modeling clay and whatever. And I made this scene with a guy on the couch in front of the TV, and it had like a floor lamp and stuff. And one of the kids just saw it and grabbed it from my desk and then just threw it on the floor and stepped on it and squashed it. And I hated that. They were doing that not just to me. I wasn't really bullied much, I suppose, because I was fighting back. If I was, but it was mean. They were not really nice. They were not really nice to each other, and I couldn't find much emotional connection there. But I did find it in a class, a bunch of classes actually, but mostly ballet class. Because at the time I was in primary school, my dad started teaching electronics and applied physics and whatever at this extracurricular. So we have these houses in Romania, these clubs, and they have a lot of disciplines. Like you can learn chess, you can learn piano, you can learn ballet, you can learn go-karting and programming and a ton of stuff that you would do as a kid. Like, oh, maybe you're interested in violin, or maybe you're interested in who knows what, and your parents can't afford it, so you go there, and they have a teacher, and it's a pretty okay place. It's a cultural center, I suppose you'd call it. And one day after school, I think it was one of the times that, I think it was the time after that kid had squashed my my sculpture, that I went to my dad's teaching place, but I would never go to hang out with him. I would hang out with some of his colleagues. I would go to programming class. I would go to listen to the piano class. I would listen to the bands, just other things, so I wouldn't be around him. And then I went to the ballet class, and the teacher was nice. She was really like, oh, calm down and take a seat, and here's a glass of water. And I don't know, I suppose the thing you would go to a parent to, or you would go home to your parents, and then you would tell them that you had a bad day in school, and they would console you and give you a glass of milk and comfort you and stuff. But I had none of that at home, so I ended up in this class. I really liked, I still do, just climbing things and doing stuff and moving around and whatever. So ballet seemed like a natural conclusion of that. It's like, oh, what do you do when you're in the city and you have no trees to climb? Oh, you go and you do ballet, because it's got classical music, and you get to be graceful, and you get to be you get to wear a tutu. And, I was always too small for wearing the shoes though, so I had to just make do without. But that's how I ended up in ballet class. I was going through all the clubs, and then I found one that really connected with me. And for 8 years, I kept doing ballet almost every day. I would go just right after school for a few hours, sometimes because I would have to wait for my dad. I would wait for my dad to pick me up from school, but he would never really show up on time. And initially, I had to just wait way outside of the school gates, at an intersection that was more comfortable for him to stop at, right under a drain. And sometimes it would rain. The drain was just leaking on top of me, and I would stand there for hours, because he would just be too busy talking to somebody he'd met along the way and stuff. And one time I waited, and then I'm cold, and I felt cold and soaked and stuff, so I went back into school. Hours later, he comes fuming after me, beats me up for not having been in the convenient spot for him. So, as early as I could, I tried avoiding dealing with them, with both my parents. I just tried to do things on my own, and I tried to not let them know that I was learning about physics, not let them get involved in anything, just keep to myself, and as much as I could just withdraw and seal myself away. And I suppose I've carried that into the present, and I'm still not. Now I'm struggling against it, because what used to help me then, what used to help me avoid beatings and humiliation and everything else, is now hindering my life. So it's a funny thing with coping mechanisms. When they're built off so much trauma, they end up turning against you when you're trying to fix yourself. So, and there was a point in primary school, I think I was in 3rd grade maybe, where by this point I was already afraid of my own voice in a way, because, as I said, I used to like singing. I used to be pretty normal, I guess, pretty just not outgoing, but I wasn't so afraid and closed off. And then I would imitate bird sounds, and I would just sing in my room and stuff. And then sometimes my mom would hear me, and she would burst into my room and just call me stupid and call me lame and call me ridiculous and just make fun of me until I stopped doing it. And I stopped doing most of the things that I liked, because it would make them react. It would make them interact with me, and I couldn't handle it. There was too much humiliation. So because of this, I started being afraid of being too loud, and I suppose you can tell from the way I'm speaking that I'm not too not too I don't know, I don't have a booming voice anymore. But in 3rd grade, we went on a school trip, and we went to the botanical garden, which had this natural lake, and the lake had a swampy part, which we visited, and then we set our picnic bags on a field nearby and stuff. And I was just, I liked the swamp, so I went next to the water. I was just looking at it, and then I looked closer and closer and closer, and then I just fell in the swamp. And I knew I was drowning, and I was painfully aware of the stuff that was under the water level, the weeds and the garbage that was getting wrapped around my feet and legs. But I couldn't scream. My entire class and my teacher were right there. They were just turned away from me, and I was there drowning and just standing there in the water, just sinking and sinking and sinking, and I couldn't utter one sound. And then eventually, I don't know if luckily is appropriate. One of my classmates just saw me and told the teacher, "Oh, she's drowning. She's in the water. She's in the swamp." And then I got taken out of the water, and I lived to see another day, get another beating, because of course I got beaten up at home for whatever, embarrassing my family, not being careful enough, and all that stuff. So school was pretty good for me, compared to home. I think at this point in primary school, the highlight of my days was the time away from my parents. And one thing I liked were holidays that I got to spend in the countryside. I hated going to the countryside. I really, really despised going to the countryside because my parents would have to drive me there. But since they don't get along, they could never agree on what to take and when to go and how long it would take them. So it was always a cause for arguments and for more me having to go back and forth between them and doing some passive aggressive thing and taking part in some just aggression and anger. But after I got to settle in, then my parents would leave and then I would be left with my grandparents. It was pretty nice in the countryside because my grandparents were growing vegetables. They were planting trees. We were tending to the grapevines, and I got to just spend time outside. And I would bring my books with me, and I could read, and I could eat honey right out of the jar and sunflower seeds, and I could have more fun. And I used to hang out with kids in the countryside a lot, and I soon learned that the kids I was hanging out with were gypsies. But I liked them. I thought they were cool. We would go across, like, around the village, and we would grab fruit from people's trees, and we would eat cherries and apricots and just good stuff. And we would play games and run around, and I would teach them English, and they would sing, and they would sing their gypsy songs and just be free. I guess freedom was something that I didn't really get much of. And as nice as my grandparents were on my mom's side, they too were telling me that I should not be hanging out with gypsies, that they're not good people. And granted, sometimes their parents would do bad things. Sometimes their parents would mug someone. But I never felt like the kids were responsible for that. I didn't mind the kids. They were nice to me. They were fine. They never offended me. They never stole from me. They never invited themselves over or anything. I was always in their houses, and I was eating at their places, and their families never treated me badly. So I didn't get the suspicion. Never understood the concept. And then many years later, I went back to the countryside, and there's this guy yelling my name in the street. Because of my reflex to just keep walking, like, oh, he was following me, kept yelling my name. So, okay, this guy knows me. And then it turned out that he was one of the kids I used to play with. And then he told me, oh, I'm so grateful to you because you taught me all the English I know. And then I went to England, and do you know how much stuff I stole? Using that English. It helped me so much. So, I guess, I don't know what to think about that, but I'm glad it helped him. Not glad it helped him steal, but I'm glad he remembered it enough. I had no idea I have impact on other people's lives, because throughout most of mine, I've just focused on them not having an impact on me, them not destroying me, them not damaging me too much. So I never had the chance to see how I am seen, or that I am seen at all. Usually being seen meant I would get beaten up, and that was something I desperately tried to avoid. But yeah, the gypsies in the countryside were fun to be around. And then in our family, they're not really tightly knit. They're not a close family. My grandparents' generation was a bit more than that, but I never really got along with them much. My mom was recluse, and she went to the family gatherings and we had to go, but she would stay away and, I don't know, cast mean looks towards them and avoid conversation and stuff. And my dad would have none of it. He would, no, they were too low for him. He was always offended by something or other. And, they underestimate me. They didn't even know who they're talking to, and they don't give me the proper respect. So I was pretty much on the fringe. I only got along with 3 people in my family. One of them was my grandpa on my mom's side, and the other 2 were my uncles, Radu and Cesar, and they're both, obviously, they're older than me. Radu's 9 years older than me, so he was kind of like an uncle cousin type thing. And Cesar was older. He's my dad's age, but we got along pretty well. I guess we were the more down to earth of the bunch. We weren't really into all the drama, all the arguments and stuff. We were just the ones face palming. But it really cemented how much difficulty I have just being accepted or being seen or being wanted. Was always a source of trauma throughout school. I think when I started out, when I was really small, I drew. I suppose any kid draws. And I mentioned on previous videos that I would draw ducks in combat boots, and that was a thing that I did. But after a while, I suppose it was kind of like the singing. It just the constant humiliation got too much, and then I stopped drawing. And then in middle school, we had this art teacher. I think I've told this story before. He would show up drunk to school, to class, and he would just hit the students, and he would hit them with this big wooden thing, and he would hit our backs and stuff, and it was a really bad association for me. And at that time, I really was mixing the person with the subject, or with the, I don't know, with art. Like, oh, an art is what an art teacher teaches you. I suppose it was in my head. So I had an aversion to it. And then he quit. He quit when I was at the end of my 7th year in school. I think he retired, or he got cirrhosis from drinking so much. I don't know, but he was out of the school. Then I started drawing. I wasn't drawing much in the beginning. I didn't draw much until high school. But by the time I got to high school, I was compulsively drawing in class because I was so bored. And I was so anxious to be around a lot of people all at once, and teachers saying stuff, and everything was super high pressure. And I don't know, I suppose by the time I was in high school, I was overwhelmed with just being around people. So I would just draw to keep myself calm. I would just, not so much doodle. I suppose they were doodles. I wasn't sketching much. I was just making stuff and making creatures, sort of. And I was really, I don't know. I wouldn't say I liked high school, but I did. It's not quite, high school was the most fun and social. It's not the typical thing. The high school I went to was more of a high performance kids lumped together. But what happened is most of them were into maths and programming, and we had 7 hours of programming a week, and I think 5 hours of math and 3 hours of physics and 2 hours of chemistry and all that. But when I got into high school, I sort of switched into, I was into math and physics before, but my parents found out about the physics thing, so my mom started to make me compete, make me solve physics problems for these magazines that they would write my name in a chart, and I would have that in my curriculum. And then, so she got involved, and I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't, she would just hover over me and tell me, you're not fast enough, you didn't even do 200 of these solutions, you didn't even do this, you didn't know, it's barely anything. And it just, I did my best to drift away from it, because afterwards my physics teacher in school also found out, and she decided she could take credit for it. So she wrote to the magazine, and she added her name in the so even though she wasn't teaching me stuff and I was just doing them because I liked physics, it became everyone else's show, not mine. I hate it when people try to take other people's fun and passion away. They just get involved and turn it into their own thing and discard the kid. And this happens very, very often.
All right, so we had to take a little break.
Yeah, I had to take a little break. I was having a lot of difficulty. Ever since I decided to talk about my story, I've had a lot of doubt about it. Like, I have a lot of trouble connecting to, oh, this is what happened to me, and this is bad, and I have trauma, and I can't quite take myself seriously. I can't quite take my pain seriously. I can't acknowledge it, because whenever I do, it gets too much to handle. And that's my other issue, is that when I'm not despondent, I am crying. And there are times when I feel like if I were to be emotionally connected to myself, there would be no end to crying. There would be no end to screaming. God damn it.
It's okay.
I cannot do this properly under any.
Well, it's revealing.
Yeah, I suppose it is. A lot of people have. I talked about parts of my story with some of my university classmates, because I tried to explain to them why I don't like shaking hands and why I don't like being touched, and because it's weird. Like, people will come at me with good intentions, like, oh yeah, nice to meet you, and they will offer to shake their hands, and I flinch, and they'll try to hug me if we're friends, and I will duck. And I don't want to hurt their feelings, so I have to explain why I don't like being touched by strangers, or not by strangers, but even by people I'm close to, but I can't handle it. And I talked to my university schoolmates about it at one point, and they were just noting how disconnected I am from my feelings. How can you talk about this with a straight face? And sometimes I can't right now, but sometimes I turn very flat, I guess.
Yeah. It's something that I feel sad about, because something Flavia has told me about is how in the past she wasn't believed about things and people thought she was lying when she was telling the truth. And I had this as well. And it was a case of, like, it sucked. It sucked when people didn't believe what I had to say. And I had to learn how to communicate in a way, how to be persuasive, all right, the reason they don't believe me is because I'm smiling. And I would often, I don't know why, but I would smile when I would say I didn't do something. Because I found it funny. I found it funny that they're accusing me. Like, when I was really young anyway, I found it, well, yeah, they're telling me, oh, did you steal this thing? And then my thoughts are, oh, someone stole something from them. Isn't that funny? I don't really like them. And so I would have like sort of a grin on my face. And then I would say, no, of course I didn't steal it. No, you're lying, you did. Oh, okay. So...
Yeah, I never did that, but I imagine from the outside, I just talk like I normally talk. No, I didn't. So, oh, there's no emotion. You don't feel insulted, probably, or you don't feel like...
Yeah, that was the thing I learned, is righteous indignation. So if someone thinks you're lying, the way to correctly get out of it is to be pissed off and like, what do you mean I'm lying?
How dare you?
Yeah, how dare you? I'm not a liar. To get out of it. But yeah, it made me sad to hear how many, because Flavia's mentioned her story on different degrees to a few people, not many. And just seeing how they couldn't really follow it really bothered me because... well, partially it's Flavia's on I guess if I'm talking to you, but it's your lack of self-esteem. You don't really think what happened to you was bad. And so when you talk about it not really that it's that bad. And there's so many parts I want to jump in because it's like, yeah, because I've heard.
You were the first person I told my story to. I had never talked about any of it until...
And I was very emotional when I heard it partially because she wasn't saying it in a very, or you weren't saying it in a very affected way, like affect in the psychological term, displaying emotion, and so what it told me was, here's a person saying some pretty horrendous things, but in a pretty neutral way. Yeah. And then what must a person be repressing in order to be so flat about something so painful? And for me it was, okay, I had to make the second step, which is not just listen to how she's saying stuff, but listen to what she's saying it, and then, okay, and this is being said with a straight... Because sometimes people do this and they get it wrong, where they'll look at someone and that person will say something really bad, but they'll be laughing or they'll be saying it in a very neutral way, and they'll interpret it like, oh, so that must not have happened, because if that was real, you wouldn't be laughing about it. But it's exactly the opposite. It's so bad that they either, in Flavia's case, she became numb and was, pretty much just squashed into a very monotone, not exactly monotone, but more flat way of speaking. Or they can also go into it's almost hysterical when they're saying things bad, because it's touching on too much. And so anyway, I feel, I don't know, it's stupid, but I feel, that's not really stupid. Anyway, I feel like I really want people to see her the way I see her and see her story as it really is. And I don't know, that probably puts too much of that's probably a huge burden. Yeah,
I know I'm not doing I'm not effective at telling my story. But on the other hand, in my experience in dealing with people in mental hospitals, I've met a lot of them who are also numb and who are also, especially with schizophrenia, what happens is you get a flattening of emotions, and I've seen and worked with a lot of schizophrenics, and I had almost no trouble getting it. I guess because I know what numbness is and I can see behind it. I don't really, and even with your videos, when I first saw your videos, like everybody was saying, "Oh yeah, you know, you're happy, you're jolly, you're I don't know, just look at you, full of life and full of life and passion." And I was like, "You're so depressed, you're so sad, you're so oh no, you're so." And you did this video where you were talking about how you don't show your face on videos, and you were doing accents, and I was like, "You are so depressed. Are you on meds? Are you on anything? Are you okay?" And people were like, "Oh, you're so cute and awkward." And I was like, "You're gone, no." Yeah, I have a lot of, I don't know, my thoughts and emotions are very, very jumbled up, and I've tried really hard to tell my story in an organized way, but it's very difficult because it's all in my head at the same time, and when I take one event apart, it's connected to everything, and here's how it is in the present, and here's what happened, and I don't know. I get super confused, and then I get doubtful. It's like, oh, is anyone gonna get anything out of this?
And the parts that are really bad, you haven't even mentioned because
yeah,
you have a lot of difficulty talking about those things.
Yeah, it took a year almost until I told you.
Something from the first, like that.
Yeah. The stuff I'm talking about is my interaction with animals and cats, especially because I really like animals. I don't know. I feel comfortable around them, and I suppose to some degree they feel comfortable around me because I kind of understand them. And I go, I'll hear a cat meowing or just sitting in a particular way or walking in a particular way, and I'll know what that implies, and their kidneys are hurting or they're gonna throw up or whatever, and I'll see a deer, and people in our town are afraid of the deer, but I'll go and I'll end up petting the deer because it's like, oh, that's what you're doing. You're coming here to be pet and to be hanging out and stuff. And they're not that scared of me. And the same for dogs that people find aggressive. I've been bitten by dogs when I was twice. Once when I was small and once when I was in high school. But it never came as a surprise, and I was never, I don't know, too traumatized by it. Because in one of the cases, I realized afterwards that I was making a threatening move. And in the other case, the high school one, their owner had they were guard dogs, 2 Dobermans, and their owner had left the gate open. So you have 2 aggressive dogs that are trained to defend and to bite and to bark and whatever, and they think the street is their territory. So of course they would come after me. Of course they would bite me. Of course they would whatever. So I dealt with it. Like I shooed them away. I hit them with my jacket and my bag and stuff, and they bit me and they bit my leg, and then I went to the hospital and got my shots, and that was that. And I had a mark and a bruise. So, okay, but I've always felt at ease with animals, and because my grandparents moved to the countryside, we had like a fully fledged farm, and we had initially we had a horse, which my grandma's brother had gifted to her as a moving in present, because I suppose that's what he thought they needed. But we didn't have a stable, so what we did is we gathered the hay from the field, from other people's fields, because we hadn't even had the chance to plant our own wheat to gather our own hay. So we gathered hay in like ballots and stuff, and we sort of scrounged together a roof from plastic sheeting and stuff, and that was our stable. And the first night we put the horse in there, the horse ate right through the wall. And I was always just hanging around it, and there's a horse, and it's just looking at it from all the angles and stuff. And then at some point I looked at it, I came at it from behind, and of course it got startled, which in hindsight it makes perfect sense because they can't see. So I got startled, and it just hit me in the head with its hoof. And I was thrown a couple of meters back. And we had goats, and the goats were funny. They're very picky about things, and they're very people-like. They've got their preferences, and they've got their stubbornness. And when they're small, they'll climb on your back because they think you're a moving rock and you're a challenge to be tackled. And you'll just walk around with a baby goat on your shoulder like a pirate would with a parrot. And we had chickens and, I don't know, turkeys and ducks and geese and all sorts of weird birds. And yeah, it was very fun when it wasn't horrible. We had cats, and I suppose out of all the animals, I connect the most with cats. And I was always playing with them, and I was always just, kitten, yay, the cats. And this one time at the countryside, we had a kitten, and I was playing with it, and my parents were getting ready for us to leave. And as we were leaving, I let the kitten go, and it ran under the car, and my dad drove over it. Then my mom kept screaming at me, just, it's your fault, it's your fault. And I still think it was my fault. I can't shake it. It's not the only time it was like that. When I was in high school, we had cats, and there was this summer, and in Romania people abandon cats a lot, and dogs, and they will just throw the animals in the street, and sometimes they're just crushed by cars, and sometimes they starve, and sometimes people hurt them. I found, on my way to school, I found these litters of kittens. 3 kittens one time and 2 kittens one time, different bushes, and I took them home with me, and they were really tiny. One of the sets was just 1 or 2 days old, judging by the eyes and the state they were in, and they were just crying in the bush. Got them home, and then a couple of days later, I heard 2 other kittens meowing from a dumpster, and I jumped in the dumpster, and I dug through the trash until I found them, and took them home as well. So I was studying for my university admission examine. I was taking care of 7 kittens, 2 litters of 2, and 1 litter of 3. And I was feeding them every couple of hours with a syringe and with milk, and cleaning them and trying to keep them warm. And because I was also going to school, I had a pouch made for them. Like I just made it out of, I think, an old hat, an old toque, and I just put a belt to be able to wear it as a bag. I took them to school, and I was feeding them all the time, and eventually they got, because their immune system hadn't developed, they got sick, and I couldn't do anything for them, and they got sicker and sicker, and then one day they just started dying. They died pretty much one after another in my hands. I tried so hard to rescue them, and I could only rescue 2. And then, soon after, our 3 other cats got sick. Our old cat. They got the feline flu from the babies. They suffered so much. One of them was just coughing all the time, and coughing just brown stuff, and choking on it, and choking on the infection. I was going to the vet every day, and they were having her on IVs, and died in the text. Couldn't do anything. I got back home, and then my mom was just hitting me and kicking me and screaming that it's my fault. I couldn't deny it. I brought the kittens in, and I couldn't take care of them. But then our other cat, one of our other cats died too. Not long after. I can't. I don't know. I don't know what I should have done. I just wish I could have done something better, more. With dogs. There was this stray dog. Romania's pretty much full of stray dogs. People who have breed dogs, they just let them run around and have puppies and just go unchecked and not taken care of and stuff. So there was this in our building, I don't know what you would call it, in our area of the city, there was this really friendly dog. There was this really friendly ginger dog, and he was just the happiest dog ever, and he was just not aggressive at all, no, just wagging his tail and playing with everyone, and I really liked him, and people were feeding him and stuff, and then he got sick. And he got sick with a disease that is supposed to be pretty much fatal all the time. But people didn't know that. But as soon as he got sick, everyone just abandoned him. Nobody was feeding him anymore. I was like, I'll take him to the doctor. Will anyone pitch in for his treatment or whatever? Nobody cared. Nobody. Just, he was sick right under their window. They could see him all the time. Nothing, no reaction. So every day I put him in a bag because I was going to the vet with a taxi because my parents wouldn't drive me to the vet. So I was going to the vet every day with him in a plastic bag because the taxi drivers really hated his smell, and he got better eventually. Like, I got this pump to pump out the mucus out of his nose and clear his airwaves, and he got better. He recovered surprisingly with no damage, no lasting, because some of them have nerve damage and stuff and they can't move properly after and whatever, but he made it, and then he was happy again, and then the city hall poisoned him. The city hall in this particular city in Romania thinks that's how you deal with a problem. You poison some dogs, and you get to see them dying and foaming at the mouth and twitching. How's that? So I don't know how much point there is to this, but I suppose it's important if I feel this bad about it. But yeah, I can't really help but help. I go, I'll hear a kitten meow and then cry for their mom or whatever, and I just have to. I have to go and rescue it. And I have my own cat. I've had him for 9 years now. His name is Pisicu, which means the cat. And I found him in Bucharest, just lying almost dead on a rock in the sun. And as I said, I've rescued cats before, dogs and stuff, but with Pisicu, it was very his temperament really matched mine. Like, he's not overly active. He's not the most playful cat ever. He will play. He's pretty serious, and he's pretty clever for a cat. And he will adjust. He adjusted very, very well to me. And initially I was gonna find a home for him, but I found that I couldn't. I just couldn't give him away. I couldn't. No, this is my cat. This is my cat. But yeah, the animal stuff has really taken a huge toll on me, and I suppose to some degree I understand animals a bit better than I understand humans. I don't know if that's good or bad to say for a psychologist, but I guess it is what it is. I don't quite remember where I left off in the chronology of my story.
You were talking about your teacher in school and the contest, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Around that period.
Yeah. So in middle school, as I said before, the schools I went to were pretty good, and as I progressed, I went to better schools. So we would often, the best in our class or in our school would just go to national contests. Go, who can solve this many physics problems, or who can write this good whatever essay on this given topic and stuff. But sorry about the noise. Yeah, so we were sort of catered towards performing, towards academic competition. And I really liked that. I thought that was just the best playground for me. I really felt at ease in it. It was kind of a I don't know, way of getting back at the teachers. Because in middle school, I had a really horrible literature teacher. She would never, like, I was the best in class in terms of literature, but she would never give me the top mark. Never give me a 10 out of 10, always a 9 out of 10. And coincidentally, she was our, what do you call, headroom? Not headroom. Homeroom. Homeroom teacher. So she was our homeroom teacher. So we had to see her many hours a week. And she really hated my guts. And she would always try to catch me unaware and ask me questions that she thought, I'm not going to be able to answer this or analyze this passage or remember what's been said, because she thought I wasn't paying attention in class and I hadn't done my homework and I hadn't read the things. And but I always had. And what I started doing was the other students in my classroom, they were taking private classes with her. She was tutoring them for whatever. This was pretty common practice. And what happened is they were telling stories about me pretty much every time they were in the tutoring sessions. Like, oh, she came dressed with this t-shirt, and I was, at the time I was wearing heavy metal band t-shirts, and I was dressed in black and whatever, and she really hated it. We didn't have a dress code, but she really hated that I dressed in a certain way and that I had skulls on my t-shirts and whatever, and that I had my hair dyed black and stuff. And so they would rat out on me. But then they would also come to me because they weren't doing their homeworks and they wanted essays written. And I was just writing the essays for them and mimicking their handwriting, and charging them money for it. And in school, the teacher would have them read the essays that I had written, and she would give them the top marks, but never me. But I had this feeling of satisfaction when they got a 10 on my essay. It's like, you got fooled. You don't even know. You think you're smug. You think you're hurting me. You think you think I'm suffering because of this. But I wrote the essay that you're grading. So that was kind of, I guess, my nerdy way of having fun in school. And then in high school, it got even worse. Or better, I suppose. Because pretty much my entire class was going to national or international or whatever competitions in one subject or another. But most of them were geared towards maths and programming and physics. Whereas I figured out, I actually like literature, and finally I am free of this awful literature teacher. So I'm just gonna pursue it. And I started writing my own essays, and I came across my high school literature teacher, which was great. She knew my former teacher, and she hated her because she was so dogmatic and because she was so narrow-minded and prejudiced and everything that I hated her for. So I was like, oh, I have something in common. Somebody sees what I saw. That's great. And she really encouraged me, and really, I guess what mattered most was the fact that she protected me in a way, because for all my results, I really had trouble getting along with my teachers, mostly. Like, I started out still going to the maths competition, but because in high school my math teacher was I don't know exactly how to describe him. He was very rude, very stubborn, very boorish, very, I don't know, just, and he didn't like me. He didn't like me because I talked back. And he didn't like me because he hadn't picked me for the class. Because basically my class was hand-picked students by the best teachers in the high school. So everybody got
You
their...
have to probably preface it with what the schools are like, because you're just saying high school, but it's not a high school, it's a specialty.
It's not formally a specialty school, but it is the best high school in the country. And the, like, achievement-wise, it's pretty much been the top for many years. But for my class, they just did this weird mutant kids experiment. Just picked us from other schools, and for me, I think nobody picked me because I didn't have connections. I didn't have previous experience, but I just wanted to get in that class because that was the best one in terms of results. And because he hadn't picked me, because I wasn't his student, he just didn't like me. And I didn't like him. I didn't like that he was loud, that he was rude, that he was trying to make jokes, but it was always at the expense of the students, and they were very crude. They were very, like, he was talking to a girl and, oh, what, you put on 3 pounds, or you came to school wearing your mother's hairpin or something. Just very, very offensive, and he thought he was cool. So what my literature teacher did was basically fight all the awful battles for me, because my thing was I don't know, I wasn't comfortable in class, not because of my classmates, but I felt too constricted. I liked reading, but when I did read my books in class, I would always get scolded for it. And eventually I just started skipping class and hanging out in the school library and reading there and eating the cookies that the librarian was baking. So that was fun. And then sometimes the teachers would just find me there, and that wasn't good because they were like, why aren't you showing up to our class, and you think you're too good and whatever. But it just got too uncomfortable. And because of my teacher, I did not have to worry about it too much, and I could just go ahead and read and draw and paint and rest. In high school, I had my first breakdown. Got to the point where I knew pretty much almost everyone in the school. I was, I suppose, popular in a way, but not the social kind of popular, but I would have my favorite students in different classes, and we would hang out and debate and discuss topics and stuff, having fun. And I don't know. This sounds very lame when I'm describing it, doesn't it?
I don't know, I just hear the Game of Thrones, King of the Nerds! King of the Nerds!
kind of, I guess we were the biggest nerds, because, I don't know if this isn't appropriate, I suppose, to say, but we did drink, in school, like, in Romania, it's not I suppose in Europe in general, it's not a big deal to have beer. And beer is available at the supermarket. And I don't know, just, you would study and you would have a beer and you would talk to your other fellow students that are having a beer. And I don't know, I guess we were weird because our idea of fun was we would go to the Philharmonica and we would talk about what we had read and what we had learned, and then we would go back home and avoid our family drama, and then we would come back to school and we would have our fun again. Go to our contests and be overall just free. I suppose because I had this experience in school, I'm really an advocate for student freedom, and encouragement in pursuit of your own goals and for your own development. And especially since, given the fact that I had my literature teacher standing up for me, it really cemented the idea of this. I suppose because my parents were not really parents to me, I really lacked this parental figure that will have my back and support me and just, I suppose, overlook my rough edges and see beyond them. And I'm really, really, really grateful for that.
What's your teacher's name?
Kojo Carano. Gabriela Kojo Carano. She is great. I don't know. I suppose I had a lot in common with her, because whenever she would tell me stories about her when she was young, she was pretty blunt and pretty just rebellious and not quite doing things the traditional way. Pretty belligerent. I suppose she saw something in me that other people didn't. I'm glad that I was more than just an inconvenience for her. But at the same time, in high school, I'd started drawing, and I drew quite a bit. I was also writing poetry because I'd made a bet with my teacher that I don't really like poetry. I should preface it. So I made a bet with my teacher that I could write poetry, and writing poetry and writing successful poetry is only a matter of form, not necessarily of substance. And sadly enough for me, I won the bet. But then, because I won the bet, she had submitted my poems to this camp, to this other contest, because that was our thing. She submitted my poems, and I was notified that I won a spot in the poetry camp out in the mountains with a bunch of people reading poetry every day, all day. So I suppose in the end the joke was on me. But it was still, I suppose it felt like even when I was frustrated about things, I was never hurt by it. Because I can't remember a single time when I was just devastated or I felt like withdrawing. The one time I did have my breakdown in high school is because I had gotten too well known and people were friendly towards me and they were saying hi, and some of them were just chasing me in the hallways and tried to hug me. And because I cannot stand that, I got to a point where I couldn't come to school anymore. I would just come to class, and I would make sure that I got to class after the bell had rung, so everybody was already in their seats. But as soon as the class would end, they would just approach me and say hi and talk to me, and people would come and I would meet them in the hallway and stuff, and I would just start crying. I couldn't stop. I couldn't utter a word, and I suppose I was just overwhelmed. And I had maybe a week where I just couldn't come to school anymore. So one of my friends just let me into her house, and every day I was going to her house and pretending I was in school and just waiting the hours away and then returning home at the appropriate time so that my parents wouldn't know. It was really, really difficult. Even though I liked the people, I guess this is something that I still have. Sometimes it's very difficult to be around people for too long, even when they are people that I like. When I'm okay with them, normal, and then suddenly my meter just gets filled up and I can't take it anymore. I can't talk. I have no more energy. And if I push beyond that limit, I break down. I will get sad, I will get angry, I will get my thoughts will go completely weird. But other than that episode, I think the 4 years in high school were pretty good. I could learn. I read a lot. I just did a lot of things. I tried a lot of things. Met a lot of people. And I got interested in psychology. I suppose I got interested formally in psychology because I really liked observing people. I just like people watching. That's a fun thing for me to do. I'll I'll sit down somewhere at a street corner or even in a cafe or something, and I'll just watch people do things, and I'll look at how they walk, and I'll try to figure out what it means without talking to them. What's their story? What's on their mind? What does their expression mean? What is their body language? And because I was reading a lot, I discovered Carl Jung's books. Got very, very interested in psychology and the psychology of religion, and just, I don't know, more and more I was drawn to the study of people. So eventually, by the end of high school, I had to decide what to do. The main task was to get away from my parents. So I knew that I had to leave the city, and I knew that I had to get into a university tuition free, because my parents said they would not pay anything and any of my expenses. So I really had to strive to get top marks and get to a good university and get a dorm and everything like that. However, the psychology university that I got into, most of their teachers were still born and raised under communism. So what happened is their entire curriculum was very backwards, was very outdated, and very rigid. So we had to learn their manuals and their textbooks and stuff, but we had to learn them word for word. Basically, you were going there to the exam, and they were giving you a topic like perception, representation, and concepts. Talk about this. But you're not really talking about this. You're not really analyzing. It's not really anything connected to real life or to people or to cases or any usable knowledge. What you have to do is you have to write down exactly what it says in the textbook, and you have to say who said it and who they're quoting, and they're all like friends or acquaintances and whatever. So you just have to name drop and make sure that you're using their bad language. Their phrases are empty. Their phrases have a lot of words and very little meaning. So for a year, I was commuting back and forth to Bucharest to take classes with this university teacher who was just basically training me in how to talk like them. Training me in how to pretend to be one of them. And meanwhile, every time I went back home to my parents, after they learned what I wanted to do with with the rest of my life, my mom was telling me that I'm never gonna make it. What is this? The humanities, studying the humanities, that's for people who are too dumb to do anything worthwhile, and I'm never gonna get in anyway, and I'm gonna be punching bus tickets for the rest of my life, and basically, I suppose the equivalent of you're gonna flip burgers for the rest of your life, you're not gonna make anything of yourself. Constantly doing that. To the point where I was studying pretty much all day, every day, and my hands were hurting from all the writing, and my head was hurting, and I was putting, I had these bandanas, and I was soaking them in cold water, and I was wrapping my head with them, and my arms with them, to just take the pain away so that I can keep on going so that I will manage to get away from my parents. And I did. I got away from that. I made it. I got in pretty much one of the top marks in that year. That was huge competition too. But I suppose the fear and the fact that I liked psychology really, really helped me. But what happened afterwards was, as soon as I left, and as soon as I settled into the dorm, I crashed. I had this huge burnout. Like, I only later found out that what I'd gone through was a burnout. Ironically, I found out when I was already volunteering at the mental hospital, and we were having this talk about high performance students and the effects of bad parenting on burnout. So basically, it was just a bunch of people who had gone through the same things that I had gone through. Their parents had treated them like racehorses and completely overlooked their children's feelings and stuff. And I was like, this is just like me. This is just like me. And one of the coordinators of this project I was doing at the time was a math teacher, and he knew my high school and he knew my math teacher. And it was such a, I don't know, I guess because I haven't been believed so often, every time I come across somebody who does get it, who has seen what I've seen, and who knows the people that I know as I know them, I get so happy. I get so happy to be acknowledged, or I don't know, at least there's somebody sees the truth. Because with my parents, they're very two-faced. They both show a very kind and caring and patient face to their students. But towards me, they never had an ounce of that. They never had an ounce of patience, and they never had an ounce of compassion or foresight. Like, I got sick one time, and I was coughing, and like I was coughing throughout the night because I was so just, I think I don't remember exactly what happened, but I couldn't breathe, and I was just and then fits of coughing. And then my mom would slap me, she would hit me to shut up. So I can't help it. I would try to bury my head in the pillow, and I would still cough, but I was trying not to be heard. And then she just hated it. She hated it. I don't know. I seem to have been the greatest inconvenience in their life. With my dad, he has more, I suppose, fortunately for me, he has more trouble keeping it in and faking it. And some people have started to see through his exterior. One thing that contributes to that is that we have Alzheimer's in the family. My dad's dad died. Well, he didn't literally die of Alzheimer's, but he died because of the degenerative process that follows with it. So he got Alzheimer's, and I got to see basically 12 years of him going through anger, denial, forced retirement, and then just devolving into a vegetable. Whenever he had lucid moments, he would just ask to die. But he wasn't afforded that, so he had to carry on living. And my dad is pretty much on the same path. He's had these signs for many years now. Like, he would lock my mom out of the house because she was outside walking the dogs, and he would forget that she's outside walking the dogs, and he would lock her out. And there was this one time where, after I had moved out, where they were cooking, and he forgot the gas burner on, and their kitchen burned down. But they didn't know. They were in their bedroom watching TV. But the neighbors called the fire department. And that was how the fire was put out. I don't know. I suppose it's pretty surreal when I talk about it, when I listen to the stories. Yeah, I guess this could be, this would be somebody's fiction writing. But no, it's quite there. But because of that, he's just bad in general. Even my mom, with all her enabling, she can't deny it anymore. When my grandpa was still alive, my mom's dad, they were trying to fix one of the barn's roof. So they were both up on the roof. And then my grandpa asked for, I think, some nails or some tools. And then my dad just got super angry, and he shoved my grandpa off of the roof. And my mom was there, did nothing. My grandma was there, just cried, and she doesn't really get involved either. My grandma's been pretty nice to me in a way, but she will be nice to me until the point where my parents are involved. Like, she knew my dad was hitting me. She knew they were burning me and stuff. She knew what a bad character he has. But whenever I got upset about it, she would always defend them. She would always protect my mom and tell me that, oh, they don't know what they're doing, and they're just kids, and they're immature, and never really stood up for me. I have very mixed feelings about her, because on one hand, my mom's parents are pretty much the only parents I had. They, out of everyone, they raised me the best, and they treated me the best. But after my grandpa died, I got to see a different face of my grandma. I got to see more than she would have wanted me to see. She was pretty cruel to me and pretty mean to me, defending my parents and putting me in situations where I had to make food for them because she was upset with them. She didn't want to have anything to deal with them, so I was cooking for them because I didn't want her to be hurt. So that's a can of worms right there. I can't bring myself to hate her, but I do resent it. I don't know. I can't be close to her. I can't trust her, and I can't. I don't know. I can't. I suppose I got even more disconnected because of that. I really cared about her, and I still do, but I feel very betrayed. Because I felt like they were my refuge. It hurt so much more. Just being so not heard and not seen. So, a different. I suppose all of this makes up the premise, the background of of why I am the way I am. The consequences of that have I don't know, they've stretched out in so many directions. My relationships have been I don't know, living proof of the damage that was done to me. My first relationship was with a guy who was he was 6 months younger than me, and he was a basketball guy. I don't know. He was in the basketball team. We were like, I was 15 at the time, and I think he just turned 15, and I was 15 and a half, something like that. And we met on a trip at the seaside, and we were together for 6 years. But he had an alcohol problem. When he was in the basketball team, they were all drinking. Worst of all, their coach, and their coach was violent to them. He was beating them. He was just belittling them all the time. When this guy he got his ear pierced, and he was very happy about it. And then his coach saw him, and he just ripped the earring with the flesh out of his ear. He just threw it away. You can't wear this. No man wears an earring. You're not a real man. You can't. Just putting him down. And he had a really bad alcohol problem, and I spent about 2 years trying to get him out of it, trying to get him to stop drinking, to stop being violent in school, to stop just being so enraged. But by the time I managed to get him off the alcohol, our relationship had deteriorated to the point where I couldn't really be with him anymore. It was just too much. And however, the problem is that by that time he'd gotten very clingy, and when I did bring up, just, we should break up, we shouldn't be together, I'm gonna be in another city anyway, he threatened to suicide, and he started cutting himself, and threatened to, got on the window and threatened to jump, and started stalking me and insulting me, and I don't know, that was a bad few years until we finally separated. And afterwards I got into another relationship, which was one of my former classmates, and we'd known each other since the 5th grade, and we'd pretty much been in the same class, and then we were in the same high school but different classes, so we didn't really talk much until my last year of high school, when I had an art show with some of my drawings, my paintings, and he saw it, and then he started talking to me in school, and we talked more, and afterwards somehow we ended up having our university campuses in the same spot, so we just met each other pretty often, and eventually we became best friends. And after about a year or two of just being friends and stuff, we became a couple. And I thought it would be fine. Initially, I was pretty happy. I thought, I'm free from my parents, and I'd already processed my burnout. When I got to Bucharest and I was finally alone and free or sort of free, I tried my best to ditch my cell phone, and I tried my best to not have any contact with the world back in my parents' city. I crashed, and I couldn't read anymore. I couldn't read, I couldn't draw, I couldn't think. And I suppose because of my mom's thing, my biggest fear was I've lost my mind. I've lost what makes me me. I'm stupid. I'm stupid now. Is this it? Did I just go all this way? Did I just do all these things, put in all this effort to escape, and now I'm dead? And I was freaking out. I was panicking about it. I felt like it was the end of me. I felt like I had nothing left. So, I don't know. I guess eventually I just gave up and I said, oh, well, I guess this is my life now. I'm stupid. And I allowed myself to relax, and I guess I do nothing. I suppose I'm just too traumatized to really be alive. And I was spending all my time indoors reading what books I'd brought with me, and after a few months I discovered that I liked light. Oddly enough. But before, because of my bad eyesight, I don't like, and my eyes hurt from bright light. I can't adjust to bright light. But I discovered that I liked it. I like the effect. I like how it shines. I liked how it bounces off of objects. I like how it shines through, I don't know, a glass of water or a ring or just tiny things that I became interested in. And I started walking a lot, and I started cooking my own food. That was a blessing. Eventually I just healed. I guess both mentally and physically I healed, because my family has a history of kidney disease. Basically, both my parents have kidney stones, because in part of their genetics and because in part of their super bad diet, they eat the worst crap. Their fridge is stuffed with bad food. They will eat super salty, fatty, just horrible food. And because of that, because they were cooking, I was ingesting a lot of salt. And my last year of high school a lot of it was just in the medical office in school, getting painkiller shots almost every day, because I could not endure the pain of just my kidneys hurt, my kidneys hurt, my kidneys hurt. I was taking pills, I was getting shots, and they made my butt cheeks numb. That's probably too much information. But yeah, once I got away, I managed to cook my own food, and I discovered what food I actually liked. I discovered that I like fish. Fish is a thing. Fish exists. Fish is not just that thing that you argue with your parents over. Fish is not just that thing that you get beaten up over. Or whatever. So going back to the relationship stuff, by the time I got together with this guy who was my best friend, I was like, I'm doing it. I've got my life kind of on track. Like I'm sort of reading again. I'm going to school. I'm kind of learning. I've made friends. I'm hanging out. I've got this guy who's a good friend, and we talk about movies. And I got into photography, and I was preoccupied with things again. I was interested again. I had more energy. But then our relationship devolved into, he too had an alcohol problem. I don't know how I find them, but yeah, he too had an alcohol problem. And I found myself in the position of, I want to get him off. I don't want him to drink anymore. I don't want him to be sleeping on the stairs of the subway, because he just got too wasted and he's unconscious, and he had very self-destructive impulses, and unfortunately so did I. So I got very, very depressed being with him, because I don't know, I guess I just wasn't equipped to help someone so long as I hadn't really figured myself out. I hadn't really sorted out my own trauma, so I wasn't that strong of a person. I wanted to be. I really I wanted to help him. I thought I had all the answers. I thought I had solutions for his issues, but no, I didn't really. So there was a time when he would just go out. He would go out with this group of friends, and they would all just get super drunk and argue and go to metal bars and concerts and whatever. And I didn't really like that. I hated the loudness. I hated the smoke. I hated the atmosphere. I didn't like the conversations because it seemed like they were about nothing. And by the time they were talking, it was really just roar. Yeah. It wasn't really entertaining. But at some point I just snapped, and there was this time when I was with him and with his friends in a bar, and there was this wave of crushing despair that came over me, and I don't remember exactly the blow by blow of the event, but I gathered up speed and I ran head on into a metal door, as I would guess my intention was to crack my skull open and die or damage myself or something. But I don't remember what happened afterwards, but everybody said that I was just sitting on the floor laughing and then crying, and then I passed out. And after that, I realized that I can't handle it. I can't handle the life I've gotten myself into. So, because I didn't want to leave him, he was my friend and I cared about him, and he was my boyfriend at the time, and I didn't want to give up on our relationship. I just withdrew again. I pretty much destroyed all the progress that I'd made ever since leaving my parents. I started playing World of Warcraft. I don't know, I didn't go out anymore. I didn't care about taking photos anymore. I didn't draw, I didn't read. I just spent my time in anxiety and sadness and despair and anger. And I got to a point where I would get up and I would hate everything around me. I would hate that I am living like this, that this is what's around me. This is what I've gotten myself into, and I don't know how to get myself out of it. And I would get up, go to the computer, which was never really off, and then just turn on WoW and play. And I suppose what saved it for me is that I had some sort of indication that I can't end like this. This can't be my life for forever. So I did my best to make friends, and I did my best to kind of collect people. There were people that they had interesting stuff to say. Just I would overhear them in the chat, and it's like, oh, you're thinking about things, and you're funny, or your story's interesting, your background's interesting. Oh, you're a biologist. Oh, cool, you have stuff to talk about that I really want to know. And I just made my own group of these people, and that was kind of how I got out of it. That was kind of how I got through the years. It was 3 years in total that I just basically cut myself off from everything and everyone that I liked. And the only contact I had was with these people on the WoW server. And then 3 years in, I finally mustered the courage to put an end to it and leave the relationship and move out, because it wasn't going anywhere. I'd lost all hope, but I didn't know. What do you do? What do you do when you lose hope? What can you do when you lose hope, but you haven't lost emotion, when you haven't lost attachment? it's not gonna go anywhere, but I didn't have the courage to abandon or to, I don't know, express myself. I don't know. I did not dare admit to myself how unhappy I was. I knew I was sad and I knew I was angry, but that's about as far as I went. So eventually I left, I moved out, and I got into this other relationship with one of my friends from WoW. And my code name for him is Voldemort, because he who cannot be named, we shall not speak his name. Initially, we really got along because we had a very similar idea about the game. Like, we want to play in a weird way, but we are coordinated and we are effective and we are kind of carefree. And it was just, he was a Russian immigrant living in Germany, and I personally like Russian culture, so we had things to talk about. And he was a programmer, and he was good at programming, so again, we had stuff to talk about. And I thought that was a great idea for a relationship. Well, no, actually, I didn't think that was a great idea for a relationship. Initially, I thought it was a terrible idea for a relationship. He was living in Germany, and I had no interest in living with somebody again so soon after my previous my previous endeavor. But he really pursued me. He really thought, no, you're wrong. I'll just prove you wrong, and I know it's going to be difficult, but we'll make it work, and I really care about you. And kind of just, I guess I felt secure. This can't hurt me. He's far away, and what could happen? And what happened is 3 years passed. 3 more years passed. And we visited each other a bunch of times, and I met up with other people from our group on the server, and that was fun. But he was not really committed to the relationship. It was always a plan B for him. And the problem was that he lied a lot. I don't think he ever cheated on me, but I think he did lie a lot about his priorities. And I'm not used to detecting lies. I'm not really that good at detecting lies. So I just fell for it. Yeah, sure, you're into this as much as I am. Okay, yeah, we're doing our thing, and we're talking and stuff, and then eventually he couldn't really keep up the facade well enough. So I started to see through it, and I started to get hurt, and I started to get pretty depressed. And after 3 years, he broke up with me, and I was devastated. I was just completely, no. How can this be? No. What do you mean? I thought we were fine. And for the first time ever, I started talking to friends about it, because I realized, like, I can't just hold it in anymore. And clearly I can't figure this stuff out on my own, and I have tons of blind spots, and I believe lies, and I'm too credulous, and just I started talking more about my anxiety, and I started talking more about my frustration, and I bounced out of it much sooner than I thought I would. I suppose that was finally a healthy decision on my part. So at that time I started doing more art and more, I don't know, just more for myself, more independent stuff, more. I finally got the courage to do enough art to go to a comic convention, which I had, as I said before, and as Psychra mentioned before, I have really low self-esteem. I don't think I'm worth much. I don't think my words or my art are worth much. And I finally said, I don't care how I feel. I don't care what my thoughts are. I'm going to do this. And I finally did it, and it turned out fine. It turned out okay. Much to my surprise, I was super anxious. I was pretty much on the verge of fainting for the entire first day. I was super stressed out, super tired. The prints weren't coming out well. Everything was just crashing. But it turned out okay. I survived. I made it. I did it. And that kind of gave me more of a boost. And at the time, I was watching a certain person's videos about art. I was watching, hey everyone, Sakura here. And here's this guy who is, his tutorials make sense. And they're not just a collection of how do you draw, I don't know, a character from a thing. This is actually useful. This is actually helpful. And I watched one, and I watched two, and I watched a bunch, and whatever. And eventually, he posted these videos about becoming an artist, where he was doing a retrospect of his old artwork and commenting on it. It's like, aha! Yes, this is what you're supposed to do. The art is not supposed to be separate from the artist. It's a language in which you speak, but you're the one speaking. And then I saw this other video where he was doing the accents, and I thought, oh, you're intelligent and you're super depressed. You must be like me. So I wrote him an email saying, wow, you're so cool. Are you left hemisphere or are you right hemisphere? And how do you deal with and he replied a completely unrelated reply. Went over his head. Didn't even read the email.
I did read it. I read it.
You did.
I read all the emails.
Yeah. So he replied. And I was like, oh, wow, you replied. I just wanted to let him know that I really appreciate what he's doing. And I'm very glad he's doing what he's doing. So he replied his reply. And I was like, oh, cool. But then a month or so after, he did another video, which was also very, yes, this is art and psychology. And you have thought behind it. And at the time, I hate to admit that I have this kind of big prejudice against people who I think are less intelligent, I suppose. Most of the artists I had met until then were in that category. To give a bit of context to that, art schools in Romania are not quite typical of what you would consider a good learning environment. We have art high schools in Romania, but everybody drinks or does drugs, or a lot of the girls are just, I hate to say this, but they're slutty. It's a lot about the bohemian lifestyle, about the artist lifestyle, and very little about the art. A lot of pretentiousness. So you get all these art high school students, and they go into art university, and then they meet, they grow up, and the teachers are just further along versions of them. Oh, paint like me if you're in my class, otherwise I will fail you. I will flunk you. So that was not a good background. And the artists I had met, the people who were into art, they were posing a lot, and that didn't give me much faith in the idea of being an artist. And after my string of relationships, I decided to venture out into the world again and get a job. I'd had a 9-to-5 job before, working for this band, It started out as 9 to 5, and it ended up being almost all day long. I was working night shift as an event photographer, and video editing during the day, and just, I don't know, handling a bunch of things. And I kind of became obsessed with working to the point where I was sleeping in the studio, sleeping in the recording studio, because it didn't make sense to spend an hour and a bit and then another hour and a bit back and from home. So I got exhausted and had to quit after a few months. So after some years passed, I decided to get a job. And a friend of mine was working in a contemporary art gallery. And she introduced me to her boss, and her boss. Initially, I was just, I need some practice in socializing. I don't know how to deal with people. And hey, you work in an art gallery. Maybe this is going to help me understand the art world more, and maybe this is going to give me some good experience. So my initial intention was to volunteer, but the gallery owner decided to pay me, thankfully. So I ended up working there for 5 years, I think.
Are you still technically?
Yeah, technically, yeah, but physically working there for about 5 years until we left Romania. But I'm still doing translations for him, and still, like, technically I'm still employed, but I'm just working long distance, very long distance. But the people I met there were definitely not the type of artist I wanted to be. So that was a huge problem. So until I got in touch with Psychra, I hadn't really come across anyone who was an artist that I could connect with. When I started talking to him, we emailed back and forth, just walls and walls of text, and then we ended up talking on Skype, and we spent an hour talking on Skype, and then 2 hours talking on Skype, and I think our longest talk was 9 hours, and we didn't really get bored of at least I didn't get bored. I don't know about you, if you got bored of talking to me. But clearly it worked out. So I met him, and I was coming at it from such a prejudiced standpoint, from such a, I know I like art, but I don't know what I can do with it. I didn't have much faith in potential with art. I tried to, I don't know, I had an idea that, maybe I could work for a game studio, and I'd done the convention thing, and I'd had a show in 2003 with my drawings, but the show was it wasn't really a good experience, because what happened is I had it in the local library, which was a good thing for me, because I really like books, and I really like reading, and the library's a safe place, and that's good. But what happened is the guy curating, I guess, the show, he asked me to cut all my drawings and, like, cut them into just cut it out from the page and then stick them onto sheets of colored paper so that they would look presentable. And that ruined all my drawings. That just made them, like, they're damaged now. I can't, they're unusable. And that was really bad. And then they had a television crew, a TV crew there, and everybody, like, I guess this is what you do. And after many years, I learned that, yeah, this is what you do. You give interviews and stuff, but I was not comfortable with that. And I thought, in my head, I really thought I had it covered, because I titled my show Noli Me Tangere, which in Latin means don't touch me. And I thought, no, this is, I did it. I explained it, right? And they wanted to interview me for a newspaper, and all I could say is, don't talk to me, just look at the art, don't talk to me. I've got nothing to say. The art is there. And that's what they printed. And that was I don't know, I guess that really ruined my confidence in what I could do with art. But I didn't stop liking it. I didn't stop thinking about it, and it just came back. It kept coming back throughout. I was drawing in university. For some reason, I was illustrating all my school projects for university. Like I did this project about Alzheimer's. I illustrated it with paintings of my grandpa and an old teacher and stuff, and it horrified the teacher that was grading my paper. But anyway, every time we had a presentation, I wanted to make it like artistic and stuff, and I don't know, I guess I never had the courage to go into it because I was afraid of what it meant. And when I was about to decide what to do for university, I guess I knew that I couldn't do art because that will not afford me escape from my parents. What am I going to do? How am I going to make a living? Where do I go? I was afraid of doing studies. I kind of still am. I was afraid of making art into commercial thing. Most of all, I was afraid of losing art. So yeah, I didn't know how to make it work. And when I met Sakura, I was like, there is hope. I have hope. I have a person to talk to that I can understand and who can understand where I'm coming from. And that was super helpful because I was so misguided. I was like, yeah, I'll work in a studio for, what was it? What did I say? I'll work in a studio for a couple of years, a game studio, and then I'll just do my own thing. And I was like all over the place. Very, not really understanding the scope of things. So then, when I met him, I felt like I can connect with someone. I can just trust someone. Finally. Here's somebody whose I don't know, principles and values I understand, whose ideas I can get behind, and here's somebody who looks at the world in a similar way that I do. And I felt very close to him, clearly. And I felt like I can be more open about things and, I don't know, tell him about my story. And he told me about his story, and that was very enraging. How much he's suffered and how he's made it out of it and how much he brings to, I don't know, anyone he meets, I guess. It's just that how many people he comes across don't really see it, which made me even more angry. But I also understood what that was like, because I feel pretty unseen and unheard even when I try to be seen or heard. So I felt like, you are one of me. One of me. Yeah, I was really happy. Just happy to meet him. That hasn't really changed. It's like, yay! I'm not alone. I'm not alone anymore. There are times where I still feel alone, and there are times where my insecurity really gets to me, or my trauma really gives me flashbacks, and I can't control myself, and I can't handle my emotions, and I'm really struggling with things. But I know there's somebody that gets it. As I was, after he moved into Romania, came to Romania to be with me, and we lived there. I decided to go back to university. I'd finished my bachelor's degree. Did my bachelor's thesis. I did these volunteering sessions at the mental hospital pretty much right after I went into university. And oddly enough, the hospital was pretty much the most comfortable place I have felt. I don't know. I guess I felt like I was among peers. I felt at home there. And I don't know, I just had no trouble talking to them. It seemed like when I have to make small talk, it's really hard for me. The worst thing somebody can, the most puzzling question for me when I just meet someone is, how are you? That's such a huge thing for me. Like, how are you? What do you mean? First of all, do you want to know how I am, or is this a formula? Later on, I managed to process that this is a formula, and you're supposed to say, "Oh, I'm fine, thank you. How about you?" And this is a politeness thing. But because I take things very, very literally, I thought people ask you about how you are, but I'm sad. I'm sad, or I'm angry, or I don't want to talk right now, or I'm thinking about this thing, and it always turned into this huge conversation that people weren't really expecting or ready for or desiring. So with a mental hospital, I would talk to patients, and when I asked them how they were, they knew what I wanted to know. I go, how are you feeling? How are you feeling today? What are you thinking about? And I genuinely wanted to know. And it's kind of the same way how they were asking me stuff, and I got it. I suppose because what comes with so many mental illnesses is a lack of inhibition and a lack of social norm, a lack of social perception, I suppose, because you're so isolated there. All the expectations kind of drop, and a lot of the polite small talk disappears. And I felt much, much more relaxed. So by the time I was doing my bachelor thesis, I wanted to talk about a case. So I did a case study. And I wanted to talk about a case that was, I suppose, important to me. And I had this patient who was a year older than I was, and he was an artist. He was suffering from schizophrenia. He had his onset pretty early at 13. He had watched his dad develop multiple sclerosis and die, and he had a mom who was sort of triggering him because she had really good intentions, but she was really proud that her son was crazy. And I don't know, that was such a heartbreaking situation for me to witness. I talked to him a couple of times, and then I wanted him to show me his artwork so I could take photos and show it in my paper. The focus of my paper was pretty much the effects of over-medicating and just indiscriminately medicating with antipsychotics, and what impact that has on art. Because what happened with this guy is he was drawing, and he was drawing a lot of his visions. Basically, he would have hallucinations, and he would chessboard, and he was there was a black hole in the sky, and just all of these things, which were a very direct translation, much more than he could accomplish with words, of how he was feeling, of what was troubling him. And none of them were senseless. None of them were pointless. None of them were, I don't know, hard to decipher for me. But what happened is they put him on antipsychotics, and this happens a lot in Romania because the mental hospitals are severely overcrowded. The conditions are really, really, really bad because of the shortage of doctors, the shortage of beds, the shortage of pretty much everything. Sadly, a lot of psychiatrists tend to dismiss their patients, and I really hated that. So what he went through is he was going on the meds, and then he stopped drawing, because what they do, antipsychotics, they kind of flatline you. They kind of turn you into a very apathetic and just numbed out person. He started being scared of his drawings. Like, he was doing anatomy studies, and he was drawing skulls, and he was just drawing bones and stuff. And then as he was going through his super big pile of drawings and showing me, he started getting triggered by them and getting scared of them. And he said, oh, he can't talk about it anymore. And I don't know, I just felt so sad, because what they took from him was his best means of expressing himself, was his best hope of being functional, and he was not to be discarded. You don't just throw away a person like that. You don't just turn them into a vegetable just because that means they're more manageable. So I really wanted to discuss a case like that, and for my presentation, because we had to present the paper in front of a committee of judges. What I did is I had the slideshow, and oddly enough, a bunch of his drawings were similar to mine. They had pretty similar themes and pretty similar, I don't know, ways of approaching it. And I just mixed my drawings in with his, and I asked the judges to tell them apart, to, like, okay, some of these drawings are made by me, and some of these drawings are made by the patient. What can you gather from it? Can you decide which is which? Can you decide which is the sane one, or supposedly sane one, because I've not been diagnosed with anything or committed or anything of the sort. And which one deserves to be medicated, and which one deserves to be holding this presentation in front of you, and which one will you take seriously, and which one will you dismiss? And the reality is, they were not able to tell them apart, and they were not able to, like, what if this was verbal? They would consider him normal. If he was talking as I was talking, they would think he's okay. And my experience with him was fine. He had a psychotic episode before I could get a chance to look at his drawings, and he ran away from the hospital. So I did something that wasn't really orthodox, is I got in touch with his mom, and I went to his house and talked to him there, and that was kind of frowned upon. They must have thought I was crazy, and they probably are right. But my entire experience with him was, he was civil, he was courteous, he was intelligent, and he was trying. He was really, I don't know. He's not a vegetable. He's not a lost cause. Over the years, I've seen people who get dismissed for nothing. And I've seen therapists. I've met therapists who don't understand artists, and who don't understand art, and who don't see how big of a resource that is. Who don't, like, oh, they would talk to somebody, and their client will say, I draw, and, I suppose a good example for this is Bob Meatbag. I do hope he won't object too much to my talking about it, but since we did talk about it on a stream, I suppose it's okay. He draws screaming faces. He was drawing screaming faces pretty much his entire life, but throughout his development, everyone who saw his drawings didn't think twice about it, didn't think they meant anything until he met Cycler. So, they mean something. Do you think they could be related to your trauma? Nah. He himself had started to discredit his own drawings because everybody around him had looked down on them and classified him as nothing, and classified his art as nothing and not to be taken seriously. And over time, once Bob Meatbag decided to draw more screaming faces and give in to his demons, they started developing. And it's a pretty explicit language. It's a pretty, I don't know, one for one, how he's feeling translates into his art. It's a metaphor, but what's wrong with that? I don't know. I get very angry with psychology students and therapists who refuse to go beyond just the surface. Like, if not you, who else? If not your therapist, who should see beneath the surface? And I decided to, I don't know, I guess bring the two sides together and talk about artists and their psychology and their story in relation to their art, and how the two connect, and how sometimes you can be too scared or too traumatized or too much in denial to talk about what's happened to you, but it will show up on the page. It will show up on the canvas. You can't help but broadcast it. And I've talked to quite a handful of people about it. When I met Psycher, I thought he was like, you're the best case study for this. You're like, it's all there. There's so much beneath the surface. There's so much that people aren't acknowledging. And when you did your story and you did your Black Sketchbook thing, I thought this is just a handbook, a manual for how to see an artist, how to look at your client as a human, instead of, I suppose the trend nowadays is to dehumanize your client and your patient, to think of them as a problem to be solved, or I don't know, an issue to be managed and to be kept behaving properly. And no, don't be too extreme, and don't get too involved, because you're told this as a therapist, and beware of counter transfer and beware of transfer, and don't get too attached to your patients, and don't get too involved in your case, because then you'll be held liable. And I don't know, it just becomes this. Why? What's the point then? If not empathy, why are you doing this in the first place? Is it just a job? If you're empty inside and all you're thinking about is your paycheck, how are you helping this person? Clearly they're suffering, and they're not suffering because they don't have enough pills in their hand. They're suffering because there's something broken in their heart. And there were some doctors and there were some teachers who took it to heart, and who took it seriously, and who were humanizing their patients, and who weren't afraid to get involved. And one of them was my thesis coordinator, and she's very good. She's the kind of therapist I wish anyone had. She's perceptive, and she's got very good analysis, and she's very emotionally connected to her patient. And she will suffer when they suffer. And I think that's brave. I think most therapists avoid it like the plague. Don't get involved. Don't get caught up in their web. Don't get, I don't know, there's so much suspicion. There's so much, like, you suspect that your patient is out there to get you, to ruin your life, to dampen your mood, to inconvenience you. There's no heart there. But she was very different. She tried to make things better as much as she could. She's still trying. I've got nothing but respect for her. But
she shall also remain unnamed.
Her name is Simona Trifu, and she is a psychiatrist and psychologist in Bucharest, and she's very, very good. She's very open-minded and very knowledgeable. That's a good role model. But what happened was, I decided, I spoke to Psychra about it, about how I felt very doubtful about what I could do with art and what I could do with psychology, and is there anything workable? Is there anything practical in this? And more as I was doing these case studies and just collecting stories and art from artists, I just crystallized into this. I should make a handbook. I should make a collection of, I don't know, examples of, here's the art, and here's the trauma, and here's the child, and here's the adult, and here's how it's all connected. And here's what this drawing says, and here's what this kind of line says, and here is how you, a psychologist, can learn more about your patient by looking at drawings and paintings. And I wanted to go to visit my thesis coordinator to talk to her about my idea for the thesis. And I went to the hospital where she was working, and if that's even possible, the conditions there were even worse than at the hospital that I first went to. And there was a patient there, a bit older than me. There's this guy he's also a schizophrenic, and he'd been committed there for years, and my colleagues were talking about him, like, oh, I've seen him for many years, and we were all girls. I think there was one guy in our year in my master's degree. The rest were all girls. So we were talking, and then they were telling me about his history. It's like, oh, you should have seen him 5 years ago. He was he's so charming, and he's so attractive, and wow, he's great and stuff. And the guy had peed himself. He'd soiled himself, and he was still charismatic, but you could see the light going out in his eyes, just flickering. Sometimes he was on, and sometimes he wasn't. And his thing was, he was never speaking straight. He was always speaking in metaphors, and he was using, sometimes, like, either he would respond with a metaphor. If they asked him what time it was, he would say something like, I don't remember his exact phrasing, but he would say something, it's the hour of the wolf, or it's the time when the clock rolls backwards, or just never just a plain answer. Or he would answer in a different language, or he would answer with a quote from some book. Just much more dynamic conversation than you would usually get. And I felt very sad for him. Partly, I kind of felt happy that they were acknowledging him as kind of a human being. Oh, they went so far as to consider him attractive and not just another patient. But I also felt very sad that he wasn't that life. He was committed to a mental hospital and let to soil himself, and they weren't doing anything. They weren't helping him. Sometimes people have the best intentions, but no initiative, not even to go out and talk about it, not even to, I don't know, they'll just assume they can't do anything about it. And I've fallen into that category plenty of times myself, so I should know what I'm talking about. But I feel like you can help. You can at least respect him. You can respect what he is, or what he was, or what you saw, and not just treat your patients as trivia. Because I'm sure this happens in a lot of other fields of work, where doctors will talk about, I don't know, some stomach ulcer. Not a person who came in and they were suffering from stomach ulcer, because that's too much. But it just becomes a, I don't know, assembly line kind of thing. It's just industrialized. Your pill dispenser, the patient is a story dispenser, and there's no connection anymore. I feel like that's wrong. It's wrong to let that just be snuffed out. I think it's wrong to just walk on by and act like you've seen nothing. In Romania, we had another encounter with that. I don't know. Is it appropriate to talk about it?
I think we've already mentioned it.
Have we?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we saw what was basically child prostitution, or what we suspect was child prostitution, but pretty much the evidence was all there, and we tried to do something about it. And then we tried to alert an NGO who promised to let us remain anonymous, but they sent our contacts to the police, and then the police started harassing me, and I managed to get out of it with the help of a lawyer eventually, but it was very traumatic. Just banging on the door and calls and threats and just, yeah. But I don't regret it. I just regret that nothing comes out of it. But I really do feel like with this whole the artist behind the art, it can really help. I feel like it can help. Ultimately, it can help artists if therapists understand more about how to treat an artist and what they can work with. And I feel like it can help artists if they just understand themselves. If they're too afraid, or I don't know. I've talked to some people, quite a few people, who dismiss their art as meaningful. Oh, you'll have a theme that keeps showing up in your work over and over and over again, but you won't pay it much mind. You'll just think it's a throwaway. But usually what happens is that those things are the clues to what's most important to you, to what you really want to do, to what just, the doodles on the side of the page tell more of a story than the text on it. For myself, my art is pretty messed up, I suppose. I don't know. I draw these characters. I call them cauliflowers because they have big hair-like things on their heads. And I've been drawing variations of them since I started drawing, I suppose, in high school. Just these desiccated figures with pretty strong thighs and pretty strong hands and arms and quite, what did you call them, predatory?
Yeah.
And they're kind of aggressive, and they're kind of, I suppose, they're more tormented than anything else. A lot of self-destructive impulses going on, and they're ripping their flesh, and they're ripping their face off, and they're screaming or ripping through the canvas and stuff. And as I allowed myself to take them more seriously, I realized more stuff about them. Like, oh, they move a certain way. They have no feet, for one thing. That was a discovery. Because I was drawing them and I didn't quite get them. I didn't quite something's off about them. How would they walk? Because in my head I see them, and some of them are big, and some of them are like as big as a horse, and some of them are tiny. But they move in a certain way. They move kind of like a animal would, and their spines are pretty deformed, and pretty much everything about it means something. Like if I was to just put a few drawings of mine and analyze them as I would other people's drawings, I would say that, the head is so... The ratio, the proportions I prefer are very specific, and they put weight on the head, because my cauliflowers don't really... Some of them, I suppose, have hair, but the hair is on top of kind of like a tumor-like growth from the head. That corresponds with my exacerbated, I don't know, desire for learning and for intellectual stuff, and suppose reading, and it connects to all of that, and just thinking, my love for thinking. And they have no feet, and the way they move is they stab the earth, and that's very indicative of my, I suppose, not so latent aggression, my repressed aggression. My connection to the world is one of very, very limited, very small. My contact surface is very small, and it's never pleasant. They're not just flying above the world or lightly caressing the earth with their feet or whatever. It's like, no, they're stabbing it, and there's no love there. Their thighs and their legs are pretty strong, because I've learned how to stand up, I guess, how to move, how to live, how to sustain myself emotionally, and how to fight the world. Their hands are pretty defined. Their arms are pretty tendinous, and what's desiccated is the torso, is what would normally correspond to the emotional part, is I suppose, if you have a torso of Venus, you don't need to see her limbs so much to know that she's a female. You just see her torso, and that's where you get the grace and the femininity and the everything. But for mine, they're tortured, they're deformed, they're aged, they're just, I guess, hurt. A lot of them just have their guts pouring out and stuff, and eventually I really like painting. I think painting is my favorite thing in terms of activity and art, but how I envision them in the long run is more of an installation, I suppose, where you would have the entire scene of it, because in my head I have the entire scene. Like, oh, the temperature is this cold, and the level of humidity is this much, and it's half submerged, and the light's like this, and like you need the entire story. And I'm really curious about people's reactions to this, because I feel like, because I've lost so much in terms of how I can express myself, I still have this. That's as much as I can, I don't know, spread my wings. I can't talk properly and convey emotion properly, but I can sort of draw it. I can sort of put it in a line, and value and a shape. Really, really wondering. It's like, oh, you'll get an audience, and I would like to be a fly on the wall and to just see people's reactions. Oh, this is wet. Ooh. This is cold. This is uncomfortable. But this is kind of warm. But this is kind of pleasant. But this shape is pretty. The emotions are conflicted. And I'm curious about how people would respond to that. Yeah.
That's it?
I don't know.
All right. Well.
I don't know.
Good job.
I don't know if I've covered everything or not. Or
not everything, of course, but
what did I miss? Did I miss anything important? Because I'm pretty overwhelmed.
Tons, but
What did I miss?
Your parents' house, the apartment, the animals.
Yeah.
Tires on the bed.
The current state of that's the current state of events. So I don't know. I'm angry about it and I'm sad about it. And
you haven't explained your mom's public image and private image thing properly.
Oh, yeah, I just talked about my dad, I suppose.
It is pretty long.
Yeah. I'll try to keep it short just for trying to be more thorough about it. But basically, the way my parents live now is they have, I don't know how many cats they have now, probably over 20 in a 2-bedroom apartment. And I don't know, I've got really mixed feelings about this. I can't say I have a firm position on it, but so what my mom does and what she started doing after I moved out is she started rescuing animals and finding owners for stray dogs or damaged dogs or cats or I don't know, I think one time she found an owl and whatever. But she also collects cats. Sometimes she doesn't want to give them away, and sometimes nobody would take them. But because she has so many, and because my dad doesn't really help with cleaning up after them or anything, they live in very, very poor conditions. I'm sad to say that I've seen worse, but that doesn't make it okay. Their house is unmanageable. Basically, because of my dad's developing Alzheimer's, and because it's allowed to go unchecked, because my mom won't do anything about it. She won't get him committed. She won't get him checked out. And what happens with Alzheimer's, the first stage is usually anger and denial. And that's what happened with my grandfather too, my dad's dad. And we had to have an entire family intervention to basically force him to retire because he was becoming irresponsible and he was damaging and he was just losing money and throwing things away and just completely erratic. However, my mom would not do that for my dad. She doesn't have him retire. She just pretends everything's fine and I don't know, keep calm and get more dogs. She will try to take care of the animals, I suppose. And outwardly, she is seen as kind of what people refer to her as an angel. And they speak very highly of her. And as I said, I have very mixed feelings about it because a lot of dogs have gotten off the streets and found good owners through her. So, I don't know. I feel very guilty about talking about it like this. It's not as clear-cut as I would want it to be. I suppose because of my own soft spot for animals. I forgive too much because of it. I can't. It hurts a part of me to throw it all in the trash, but the cats she keeps in the house are suffering, and she cleans, but she cleans with chlorine, and that makes them poo blood. I let her know about it, and she said, yeah, that's what they're always like, and that's just what they do. And every animal she rescues to send to a new owner has to get vaccinated and just properly medicated and disinfested. But none of the cats in the house are vaccinated. They're not properly taken care of, and they're loving, and they have a cat society. With so many cats, they have their groups and they have their preferences, and the few times I have visited in the past years, it's always... I get happy and I get sad at the same time, because the cats are so nice and they're so loving, and they will come and they will hug you, but some of them are so underfed and stressed because they're crowded. And one of the cats I rescued, the one in the dumpster, she is maybe a bit over 1 kilo in weight, which is super emaciated. She's stressed out all the time. She's very neurotic, and I don't know. I feel guilty because I can't take them away and just not. I don't know how to help them. I wish I could. And I wish she knew how much she can handle, and she wouldn't stretch beyond that because it hurts the animals. And for me, with getting pisiku, I knew that I can't have more than one cat. And I did find cats afterwards, but I always had to, as quickly as I can, I have to find a new home for them, because I can't keep them. I can't take care of them. I can't teach them. I can't give them the time and the care that they need. And for my mom, she doesn't get it. She just brings more and more and more into the house. She's taking them off the streets, but I don't know. Sometimes I wonder is that it? You just took them off the street, but they're stressed and they're sad and they're neglected. It's not fair. But I don't know. It's a pretty crappy situation, and I'm very confused about how I look at it, because sometimes, like every time I go there, I get angry. At they're so underfed, they're so stressed out, they're so in pain, and some of them get sick, and what do you do then? Why do you do less for the cats that you have in your house than for the ones that you give to other people? And that's pretty much what happened with me too. I guess I connect to it. Why do you treat your own child worse than you do your students at school? But I don't know. I don't know how to properly talk about this, but anyway, their house is in such bad state that my dad has taken over the entire bedroom, and my mom sleeps in my former bedroom, and my dad sleeps with car tires in bed. He has winter tires on his bed, and there is barely room enough to walk from the door to the part of the bed that's still unoccupied by car tires. And I think he has a fender too. I think he's got like 2 or 3 chainsaws that aren't working anymore. Just collector of junk. And he's done the same in the countryside. After my grandpa died, my dad just started bringing in junk, like old iron things that people would throw away to the recycling. He would take them off their hands and bring them. We have an old 50s fridge sitting in the yard, just rusting away. An old car, also rusting away. An old trailer, also rusting away. Hooked to the car, that's also rusting away. I had 3 dressers in my room in the countryside. 3 ancient, falling apart dressers that I took apart and disassembled and put away so that I can actually live in the room. And then he got super mad at me. Does he not have a place at this house? Is there no room for his stuff? The entire yard and the entire house are full of his stuff.
He owns the house.
Yeah, he owns the house, courtesy of my grandparents' decision of when they moved to the countryside. They put... Okay, so at the time, if you owned more than one house in name, you had to pay a huge tax. Because the laws, when they moved, were still in transition and stuff after the communism. So they put the countryside house in my dad's name, because they also thought, they shouldn't put it in my mom's name, because then what if my mom and my dad fight over it? Like, oh, what if he feels unappreciated and stuff? And no. He has to feel like he's the man of the house. So they put it in his name only. And the apartment that my parents live in is still in my grandparents' name. So it just became this paperwork jungle that they never got out of. And that just gave my dad freedom to do anything in the countryside, screw up anything in the countryside, because he technically owns the place.
Although he lost the papers that prove it.
Oh yeah, he lost the papers. He lost the deed to the house. So the first thing, I think the week or a few days after the funeral, my grandpa's funeral, my dad drove to the countryside and he opened the door to the house and started yelling at my grandma. Give me the papers to the house. Give me the papers to the house. So she gave him the papers to the house, and then he lost them. But my parents have lost their marriage certificate once. That's not news. That's just how they roll.
Well, I guess there's plenty more, but it's getting pretty long.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know why I feel kind of sorry but thankful for whoever has listened up to this point.
Yeah, that's how I felt when I did mine. I was like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm really sorry you had to listen through all of this crap.
It wasn't crap.
On the upside, it took a bit over 3 hours, and it took me 31 years. So you got a condensed version.
Yeah. We haven't even told them how many appliances.
Yeah. No, let's not get into that. No more.
Yeah.
It's enough.
All right.
I don't know how to end this.
You have to say, hope it helped.
All
right. Thanks for watching, everybody.